Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview program. We're in New York, the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Our guest today is Majed Al Ansari. He's an advisor to Qatar's Prime Minister. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
All the talk here is about the deal between the US and Iran. 5 citizens held in the other countries were freed. Iran will be able to access $6 billion frozen in South Korea, and this was done largely through the mediation of Qatar. How far back was Qatar involved in this deal?
So these negotiations started about 2 years ago, and they were, I can tell you, very difficult and very long and very involved a lot of in-betweens and meetings in both Tehran and Washington, D.C. Our officials went through a lot of shuttle diplomacy between the both capitals. Indirect talks were held in Qatar in order to reach this agreement. I think one of the main challenges there was building trust between both sides. We know that the situation was quite difficult. It's been a long time since there's been viable negotiations between the United States and Iran, but we are quite proud of what we have achieved here today, getting these people back to their families.
Right, so this involved also direct discussions between US and Iranian officials in Qatar.
Yes, of course, it started with being indirect discussions in Doha, but at one point they became direct discussions in Doha. Very limited, but of course they achieved the required goal. And all through these two years, working on guarantees and agreements over the details on the financial side of the agreement and details on the prisoner swap, including names and dates and even the procedures of how it's going to be done. All of that took a lot of discussion, but right now we can see, of course, as the prisoner swap deal has already been done, that's been a success.
Right. When was really the deal clinched? I mean, was it just very recently that things really came into motion?
It was a cumulative process. A lot of the details were hashed out through the months coming up to this. But as you know, with all deals, last-minute details are always quite sensitive, and last-minute negotiations are the most difficult.
Right. Was the most difficult part the issue of the money? I said $6 billion, it's a lot of money, dollars frozen by South Korea per US sanctions. Iran will now be able to access them. However, Qatar will remain involved in monitoring how those funds are going to be used.
Yes, the funds were transferred to Qatar under the agreement that was held between the both sides, that Qatar will work as a guarantor through the money being in Qatar, and the guarantees that were put in place by the United States will be implemented in that process. And of course, the money can only be spent on humanitarian issues, and this is why it was dubbed the humanitarian channel, the process that is in Doha. So it will be spent on food items, agricultural products, medicine, and medical equipment.
How can you guarantee that? You're hearing skeptical voices say you give $6 billion to Iran. How can you really control how they're going to use it? They might use it for a nuclear program, missiles, and so on, not for humanitarian.
Of course, that's what the 2 years were for, there to build the system whereby there are the guarantees that will make sure.
It's a bulletproof system.
It is. You can never say that you have a bulletproof system, but I think that the guarantees that were put in place were satisfactory to the American side, as they were satisfactory to the other side, and the logic behind designing this process was, as you said, making sure that it's not spent on anything that is outside of the scope of the agreements, and I think both sides understand that very clearly. I'm very happy with the procedure that is put in place.
Could Qatar play a similar role, or is it already playing a similar role? We know that there are other nationals, French, other Europeans, that those countries consider held hostages by Iran. Are you maybe seeing what happened as a template, and are you in discussions with Iran about other routes?
Of course, in the beginning of our role between Iran and the 5+1 group, our main goal, of course, was the return to the JCPOA.
The nuclear deal.
Exactly. That, of course, faced a lot of difficulty At many points, it was not realistic to assume that we can even work towards returning to the JCPOA. And therefore, the idea was to compartmentalize the differences between both sides. And we found that issue, especially the prisoner swap, as a very viable issue that can be negotiated and we can reach a conclusion with. And this is what happened with the agreement right now. And we believe that this agreement should be seen as a first step to more agreements between both sides that can then be widened to include the 5+1 format, and that we can actually introduce more difficult discussions over more difficult issues, namely the nuclear program. We are committed to playing a positive role in this mediation, and I think the rapport that we have now with the establishment of the humanitarian channel in Doha and with the prisoner swap taking place will help us develop this much further in the future.
So what you're saying is that contrary to the perception, the nuclear talks can be revived. I mean, there have been efforts. They failed, essentially, for the past few months. The US and Iran have not really given strong indications, but you believe that there is hope that they can really be revived following the momentum.
Well, in Qatar, we are always hopeful.
Yes, but that's
we understand the situation is very difficult. We do understand that the negotiations that took place were not under any dreamy reality that this will be done in a very short time. However, we do believe that we have accomplished a step that was quite seen as unrealistic a couple of months ago. And therefore, we should build upon this now and see how we can advance this further in the future. This is not only talk. Of course, there will be a lot of work to see how we can capitalize on this. Not necessarily that we'd reach a return to the JCPOA, within a short span of time. But as I said, it's compartmentalizing the differences and the main conflict points between both sides and finding venues of understanding that can advance the cause further.
Have you formally offered both sides to host talks on the nuclear issue?
I can't get into the details of that. I know that at the moment there are no direct talks on the nuclear issue taking place. However, there are other issues on the sidelines of that issue that certainly can be negotiated. We are always open if we are required to by one or both parties to help on mediating in any of the issues in that regard. We've seen this process accomplish what we have seen in this week. 5 or 10 people are back to their families in both countries. We've seen all the emotional videos and pictures of the detainees coming off the plane. That should be a reason for hope and a reason to continue working on the same path.
Right. Iran-Saudi rapprochement, do you think it's for real, number one? And do you think that it could have direct consequences in Yemen?
In Qatar, we have always maintained that we believe that dialogue is the only way forward when it comes to conflict. And we have always called for a real and genuine and sincere dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are our neighbors, they're not going anywhere. And the only way forward is to have dialogue with them. We have a lot of differences with them, we have a lot of issues that we can work together, and we need to talk directly with them. So whenever there is any kind of dialogue happening in the region, we believe that is for the benefit of the region, it is for the security of the region and our peoples. So we are always supportive of such action. And it has opened the door for more negotiations over difficult issues like Yemen. We are hopeful that this would de-escalate in the region as a whole. We do, of course, understand that there are still issues to be discussed. This is not the end of the dialogue between both sides, but we are encouraging to this, and we are always supportive of such measures in the region.
Right. We just talked about Iran-Saudi rapprochement, their efforts by the US to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Israel, of course, normalized relations with several countries, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, not with Qatar. What's your view on the Saudi-Israeli rapprochement and normalization?
Of course, we've always maintained that the normalization decision is a sovereign decision of each state, and no other state can have a say in that, and it should be respected. However, we believe also that no country in this region has a war with Israel. The only problem Israel has from a security perspective and from a political perspective is its occupation of the Palestinian territories. And therefore, the only way forward for peace in the region is for us to focus on the Palestinian issue and on the revival of the talks and the dialogue over Palestinian statehood. This is the only way for increasing the level of understanding in that issue, but also increasing the level of security in the region and solving the issue altogether. While normalizing, as I said, is a sovereign decision for each
It's a bad
state.
decision, you think, at the time when the emir said there was apartheid right now in Israel.
Right,
so
exactly.
if Saudi Arabia decides to normalize, what message does it send to the Palestinians? They feel it as a betrayal.
As I said, it's a sovereign decision. Each state has its own national interest to think about when they are doing this. So we are not at a place to comment on other states' decisions.
But that's not your intention.
We have made our position very clear. The normalization should come after, as it was stated in the Arab Initiative, presented by Saudi Arabia and agreed upon by all Arab states, that statehood for the Palestinians and an end to the Palestinian plight in a state that has its capital in eastern Jerusalem under the 1967 borders, that should be the gateway to normal relations in this region, ending the occupation, one of the longest occupations in human history that is still there. Ending that occupation is what is going to bring about peace in the region as a whole. Our position has always been that our role in the Palestinian issues and with the Israelis has always been constructive. We have always worked toward de-escalation in Gaza. And therefore, it cannot be said that we are completely out of the issue. However, we do believe that normalization should be the result of peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Right. Syria, Qatar opposed the return of Syria to the Arab League. Why?
Well, we've made our position very clear on this, that we do not think that the regime has changed in any way that would merit a return to the Arab League and readmitting the Syrian president into the international community. We have said very clearly that there are war crimes here, that there are countless human rights abuses that need to be addressed, and the Syrian people have suffered so much to get nothing in return at the end of this.
I want to thank you very much, Majed Al Ansari, for answering our question here on France 24 from New York, and I want to thank you all for watching this show. Thank you.